my parents also had a lot of people questioning them, and you're taking this young family to the desert and to this poor community. Like, how dare you as parents? How can you put your children through that? And my parents, they responded saying, how can we teach our children to be obedient to the Lord if we're not going to be obedient? And I think that's the main thing that I've taken away, and my brothers, I'm sure, would say the same, is actually our parents modeled obedience beyond comfort, beyond what we think is okay. And that's how I want to live my life. I want to be obedient to the Lord, no matter where or what that takes me to.
Hi guys, Matt here from Frontiers. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Raw Mission, the podcast where we bring you challenging and inspiring stories of ordinary folks sharing the good news of our extraordinary God in some of the toughest parts of the world. One of the things I love doing in my current role is speaking at university Christian unions, encouraging students to consider the Great Commission, to take seriously Jesus' final words to his disciples, to be his witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And the students I meet are usually in their 20s. They've got a great love for Jesus. They understand the importance of passing on the good news. And they're often still working out what their futures might look like, unhindered by job demands, mortgages, family commitments, and so on. In fact, I often pray that the Lord will raise up a new generation of men and women like C.T. Studd, Hudson Taylor, Amy Carmichael, Sundar Singh, and George Leal, men and women of great faith who are remarkable pioneer missionaries. And in today's episode, you'll meet three fantastic young people, Zach, Lena and Astu. They're all studying together, and they're helping to inspire their whole CU to pray for the nations, to reach out on campus and consider giving their lives to the mission of God amongst those with no access to the gospel. Okay, well, today we have a very different kind of podcast episode, and I'm really excited. I've got three guests at one time, and they're all students. A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed someone 86 years old, and we're going down the other end of the scale today. We've got some fantastic young people, some 20-year-olds. Well, how old are you guys? I don't know, 20, 21, 22?
20.
They're nodding at me, yes. We've got these fantastic guys in their 20s. We've got Zach, we've got Astu, and we've got Lena. So I'm just going to do a quick intro. Lena, hi.
Hi.
How you doing? Good to see you. And tell us, I don't know, give us a 30-second intro, Lena. Tell us something about yourself.
Okay. I'm in my first year at university studying agriculture with animal science. Coming to uni is where my journey for the nations really started. It's been, a bit of a roller coaster in the past 8 months, but very exciting.
Wow, brilliant. That sounds a really interesting degree as well. What about you, Zach?
I'm very similar, first year student, except I'm doing filmmaking. And in regards to the nations, I would like little bits for a while, but getting to uni, it was very much, here you go, very in my face, and I couldn't really ignore it. It was there. And that's me.
Nice. Brilliant. Where are you from, Zach, in the UK originally?
So I'm from just down in South Wales, despite the accent.
All right. Yeah. South Wales. Brilliant. And Lena, I think I knew you're from the Cotswolds, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, many of our listeners are in the States, and they hear a lot about the Cotswolds. They dream about visiting the Cotswolds.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a plug there for, some beautiful parts of England. All right. And then we've got Astu. Now, I know you a little bit better, don't I, Astu? You used to babysit our kids a few years back.
I did. I was working out. I think I started babysitting when I was 14 for your family. So it's a few years ago now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Where are you? I mean, it's harder for you, isn't it? This question, where are you from, doesn't really work. Tell us a bit about your background and where you grew up or as a kid.
Yeah. So, like you say, not a straightforward answer. I am from the north of England originally. But the longest I've ever lived anywhere is West Africa. That's where I grew up, spent 12 years there. And since then, moved around the UK, traveled a bit around the States, and now at university as well. So in my second year, also studying agriculture with animal sciences.
Awesome. Okay. So yes, what we're going to do then in this episode is we'll start hearing more about your story, Astu, because I want to dig into this idea of being a TCK. Now, some people won't be familiar with that expression, a third culture kid. In the old days, it used to be called Mish Kids sometimes. But I mean, I'm not really one of those, but I grew up as an army kid. So I've got some of the same experiences of just moving every couple of years, or lots of transition anyway in my life. So I think there's some really interesting things we can just learn about, hearing from your experiences growing up in West Africa. I'd love to hear, and our listeners, I'm sure, will be fascinated to hear what that was like for you. What memories do you have? What were your parents doing out there? And then we'll come on later to how that's impacting you guys today and your university today.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, 12 years was a long time to be there. I think one thing that's worth mentioning is actually that was home. That was normal for me. I was 11 months old when we moved as a family. So it's my parents, my 2 older brothers, and myself. And yeah, that's the longest I've lived anywhere. So that was home. That still, to some extent, is home. And that was normal. So when people moving to the UK, when people were asking me what life was like, then actually it was really hard to think about what life was like, because the different bit was the UK bit. But I think also maybe third culture kid, the where that phrase comes from is this idea that you've got your parents' culture, that's your first culture, the home country culture, which is the second culture, and then in your house you have some weird mixture culture. So like we grew up eating African food for dinner but sandwiches for lunch, so our family was doing where you mix the two cultures together somehow. So that was the context I grew up in, was a very unique setting.
So paint a picture of West Africa, because I've never been to West Africa. I've been to North Africa, Southern Africa, but what did it look like? What kind of, did you live in? People often think, oh, if you live in Africa in a missionary family, and I know you were part of a missionary family, your parents were with Frontiers all those years, weren't they? But what did it look like? Were you in the city? Were you in a village? Were you in a mud hut? Were you in a house?
I often get asked if I had lions as pets, which I didn't. Not part of the deal. No, so we lived in the capital city. We often traveled to villages and stuff, but mostly we lived in the city. And my family felt called to work with both the Black Africans of the country. There are lots of different people groups there, but we worked with the Black Africans, and also felt called to work with the poor. So we lived in one of the poorest districts of the country, grew up without running water, no TV, no tables or chairs. We lived very much like the locals. Our first house didn't have any electricity, and it was all very basic living, but living in community. So even our house, our front door, we shared with a local family, or several local families throughout the years. And yeah, very much living in community with these people. Grew up speaking language with them. For me, my brothers and I went to a French school on the other side of town, part of the French embassy. So I grew up speaking French at school, English at home, and then this local African language with my local friends. So
now, I'm sure lots of people say to you, oh, wow, what was that like growing up without electricity or running water? And you probably just think, well, I don't know, I didn't know any different. I was a kid. It's just completely normal. That's kind of what you were touching on earlier, I suppose. Yeah,
exactly. That was completely normal. For me, things like shower heads, they really scared me, or hoovers, because these are things you don't ever come into contact with. And so the fact that water is coming out of the wall at you feels quite attacking. It took me a while to get used to that, especially when it's hot water and you're used to just water that you've left out and to warm up for the sun. So
yeah. Did you feel a little bit odd one out when you were back in the West, in England, and then odd one out at all growing up? Did you have a sense that I am different to people around me just because of my skin color or my family background? Or did you not really? I mean, probably for your first 2 or 3 years, as a little kid, you don't even notice those things. But tell us about those sort of primary school age years.
Yeah, definitely. I've always felt like I stood out. In Africa, I stood out because, as you said, my skin color. We were one of the only white families in our area, and I was a very blonde little kid, and that is, I used to get called Barbie all the time and things, because that's the only thing that you could really connect with. And then moving to the UK and thinking I'll finally fit in, but actually feeling African inside and looking like everybody else meant that people assumed that I was normal, and I just didn't understand. There was so much I just did not get. It took me a very long time to feel like I connected with the UK at all. So yeah, always feeling like I stood out.
What was the hardest thing about coming to the UK? I mean, maybe that just social connecting with other people, not quite getting I don't know, the language, the culture here, but are there particular other things that you just thought, I miss, what did you miss about Africa?
Yeah, I missed loads. I didn't do a very good job of grieving leaving Africa. So that came back later on to still needed dealing with later on. So that came out actually in some pretty sticky mental illness patch. So that those definitely things I could have done better in the transition time. But I think the main things I did miss was, feeling like I knew the context. Suddenly everyone expected me to know stuff and I didn't. But my whole family had moved. And so I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about the stuff that I was struggling with, the things that made me stick out. I used to wear long skirts to school on mufti days, the days where you don't have to wear school uniform, because I wasn't comfortable wearing shorts. This was just weird for me. And lots of things, subtle things that you don't realize. And I really missed the sand, the desert. Obviously my family, and I've now grown to love this, but my parents really missed the greenery in Africa because we grew up in the Sahara Desert. And so that you leave the house and there's just sand and dust and everything everywhere, and they missed green, they missed grass. But I missed it in reverse, the other way around, missed all the sand and everything, and being able to go to the sand dunes for my birthday party and roll down sand dunes and spit watermelon pips and things like that were so normal to my childhood that suddenly you can't do that here.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. And I mean, just one more question just for you before I bring the other guys in, or we start thinking about going ahead and into university and what's going on right now with you guys. Sometimes people say to us as parents, why would you take little children, babies? We had this exact question for our eldest daughter. Why would you go to Pakistan and take a 3-month-old? Are you crazy? I mean, even one person said, are you taking her? It's like, what? Of course I'm taking her. We're not leaving her behind. But I mean, do people sometimes look at you with pitying eyes? Oh, you didn't get the English education and all the great things about living in the West. How do you respond if someone says something like that to you? Oh gosh, poor you growing up in Africa.
I mean, I'd say poor you guys for growing up in the UK.
Right,
I think I had the best upbringing. I got to experience other cultures when I'm a kid, and you just soak it up. Grew up multilingual. That's like such a privilege. It means that so many things in life are not a big deal now. Grew up experiencing real poverty and just knowing these people. Like we talk about the starving kids in Africa in the West, but those people have names for me. Like they're my friends, and that's such a privilege to see that. But I think the main one is my parents also had the same. A lot of people questioning them. You're taking this young family to the desert and to this poor community. Like, how dare you as parents? How can you put your children through that? And my parents, they responded saying, how can we teach our children to be obedient to the Lord if we're not going to be obedient? And I think that's the main thing that I've taken away, and my brothers, I'm sure, would say the same, is actually our parents modeled obedience beyond comfort, beyond what we think is okay. And that's how I want to live my life. I want to be obedient to the Lord, no matter where or what that takes me to.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so easy, isn't it, in the West to think, I want the best job, a nice family, a good house, comfort, security, plus Jesus, because he's the bonus. I was like, wait, I'm sure that wasn't Jesus's model. Democracy plus a little bit of heaven. And
actually, we're the ones that miss out if we live like that, because we're the ones that are living life not to its full. Like Christ offers us that. Let's take it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so powerful. Yeah, it is a gift. I love what you just said there. That word privilege. I mean, what a word for the last few years. Just all around the world, people are thinking about what is privilege. Yeah, white privilege, this privilege, that privilege. And the kingdom of God turns so much upside down, doesn't it? And I think your experiences, I'm so glad that it seems like you look back on it saying, no, I see that gift, and what I love about your family, and I can say this, Astu, because I know your brothers and I know your mum and dad, is there's no sense of sort of Messiah complex. You guys went as learners, and you went to serve and to live alongside and be friends with, and just bless the poor if you could, as you could. And it's obviously had a great impact on all of you as a family, which is fantastic. There's so much we could go into on those kind of topics, but I really do want to hear about university life, and tell us a little bit how it was for you then, moving into university, and the vision that God kind of gave you to think about the nations and encouraging others to consider the nations and God's heart and God's glory. And then we'll ask Zach and Lena, how their journey has mapped into yours or come alongside yours.
Yeah, so finishing sixth form, I took a couple of years out, and then came to this university and was in for a bit of a surprise, because I'd spent growing up in a family that were nations minded, and a lot of friends around me nations minded, suddenly coming to uni and realizing that people can be sold out for the Lord, but actually not really consider the nations. And so I was part of the Christian Union, heavily involved in that. And I was just really saddened by actually how little the nations came up in people's agendas. People didn't seem to actually care that much. And that it broke my heart. For my first year at uni, I felt like I was talking to people about something that I was really passionate about, and that I felt that God was really passionate about, and they didn't get it. And like I said earlier, they were missing out on this, because that's part of God's heart. We're the ones that miss out when we ignore that. So it didn't help as well that I started uni during COVID. So my freshers year was almost all online, and what I could do was go for walks with people. So I went for lots of individual one-on walks with people, and so it was just kind of beginning conversations with people. And often we talk about the nations for a bit, but then like most people were like, yeah, I don't see myself living abroad, and that was kind of the end of that. And didn't get very far with it. But then I was nominated to take over as international secretary. And so I thought, okay, this is my chance. So I only
watch out, world, here she comes.
Exactly. So I accepted the nomination on the basis that I not only ran the international outreach that the university, the CU was already doing. We have a Globe Cafe, but that I also set up a separate group, which I was going to call Heart for Nations. And this is based off of a model that actually my older brother initially did in a different uni. That didn't really catch, but a lot of what he did I wanted to use in this context as well. So set up this group called Heart for Nations, and the design of Heart for Nations was, whilst the Globe was to give international students a chance to feel welcomed and get to know Christ in this university context, Heart for Nations was to give the CU a chance to learn about God's heart for all nations, and what that means for us, how that plays out here on campus, but also abroad, long-term, our lives. How are we actually supposed to play our part? If the Matthew 28 Great Commission applies to everybody, which in some ways I think we'd agree it does, then everybody needs to be playing their part somehow. And mostly people don't, because they just don't know how, or they don't get it. And so let's give a chance to learn together what that looks like.
So I remember you starting off with this dream, but thinking, I don't know, this isn't the biggest CU that I'm at, and people, I don't know if they're going to think I'm mad trying to encourage everyone to think about going overseas or God's heart for the nations. How did that journey go? And then we'll bring in the other guys as they step into a slightly different world next year.
So like you say, it was God gave me this vision for doing this, and I couldn't see how it was ever going to work, but still felt very clearly that this is part of it, and was imagining it as on a very small scale of, we'll just see what God does. He's a big God. Maybe a couple people will be interested, and that would be great. And so spent the summer praying into it, thinking about practically how it would look. And then suddenly all of these freshers arrived, and they had no idea what was going to hit them. But even straight after Freshers Week, we had a launch Heart for Nations event. Well, this was still when it was just new. We just invited everybody, and I'm quite a loud, this is how we're doing it, guys, come this way person. And so everybody, like a bunch of freshers, just came because I was pitching it as, this is something the CU does. Like they didn't know that it was new. which is where these two guys stepped in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll come back to Astu to your, what happened and your reflections on it. But yeah, let's bring in these guys. Zach, let's start with you. What you turn up and there's this girl saying, "Come to Heart for Nations. It's awesome." What was your experience of that?
I mean, if we go back, it was a little different where I've just come out of doing everything in lockdown. So this is basically my chance. Let's just see as many people as I can, because I can now. There's no restriction. So when this came up, oh, well, okay, that'd be a fun evening. And also, yeah, Astu can pitch. She's very persuasive. So coming along to this, not really knowing what to expect. And yeah, it just kind of felt like being called out. Like, I'm not sure if that's how everyone felt, but it was for me, because I thought I had a heart for nations, and I kind of, because I wasn't new to it, but also I really was. And this was, no, this is what it is. This is God's kingdom. And what are you doing about it? Okay, cool. That's how I'm going to start uni. That's nice.
Right.
Yeah.
So almost for you, it was within the first couple of weeks, starting to think quite big about world things, the global church, or your role in it. Practically what happened, was it just going to occasional meetings, or did you guys run a course together?
We did a MomentumYes fairly soon afterwards.
We had the launch event that was open to everybody. We encouraged everyone. This was a standalone event, but whilst we were at the launch event, we also plugged what was called the MomentumYes Course, which is a 6-week course. Such a useful tool. I was expecting maybe a few people from the launch event to come along to that, but vast majority signed up to the course off the back of the launch event.
How many people then?
So we had 17 at the launch event and 12 signed up for the MomentumYes course from there.
That's great. Okay, so Zach, just continue. What was that like for you, that course? Was that quite important in your journey?
I mean, at that point, it was more just hammering a point home, because growing up, I've had a number of things said over me that just never really made sense. It was getting here, not only did it all suddenly make sense, it was just, there was a lot of peace about it. And doing this course, yeah, I feel like I'm going to say hammering home a lot, because that's pretty much what it was doing, because I couldn't really say no at that point. It's very clear where God's pointing me. It's like, well, nice, let's go.
So at this point, you feel you could well be a long-term goer one day?
Yeah, that's the direction I feel God's pointing me in.
Okay, let's bring Lena in. How does this all fit in with your story, Lena?
So I took a year out before coming to uni, and just so happened to coincide with lockdown and COVID. So it ended up being a year of isolation and quiet, and God did a lot in my heart, but it was all very hidden and kind of heart level work. So coming into uni, I was like, I'm going to get stuck in to CU, like everything they put on, I want to go to, I want to meet people, want to get involved with what God's doing. And yeah, when Astu did the launch, I had no idea it was new. I was like, this is something that the CU put on, so of course I'll go along. And there was definitely a kind of level of fear of missing out, probably, like I want to go to everything that they're putting on. So when MomentumYes was run, I was like, yeah, of course I'll go to that as well. Having no background with the nations, no heart for the nations. So yeah, that course just opened my eyes in a way that I didn't think was possible. And yeah, I went from someone who had no heart for the nations to, by the end of a couple months, I couldn't really see any excuse or reason not to go. God definitely changed my heart and changed the kind of way I saw life and saw the nations in relation to him.
That's really cool. Wow. Yeah. So how can you imagine? I mean, you guys have got several years to study. It's not very likely that you'll be jumping on a plane to go long term. So how are you imagining that the next few years might go for you?
Yeah, for me, I've now just taken on the role of international secretary from Astu. So I now run the Globe Cafe and taken on the leadership for the Heart for Nations group. So I definitely see that right now God's calling me to continue what's happening here in uni and helping other people see God's heart for the nations and see other people change in the same way I changed.
That's brilliant. And who are you coming across at Globe Cafe?
Yeah, so we have a lot of people from South Korea and Malaysia in our university and in our town. So we have people from there come along, and from Europe, and a good mix from all over really. But we have quite a random mix of personalities, and people come that you wouldn't usually stick in an event together, but it's always a fun time. Yeah.
Awesome. And Zach, another way, sometimes if people are starting to think about going long term, okay, well, I've got several years before I jump on a plane. Sometimes people think about doing a short-term trip or getting in with a community of other people thinking about going long term. Is that something you've been able to work into your schedule over the next year?
Well, one of the other things Astu is very persuasive over is a trip that she's co-leading to Gambia this summer. And a number of people who did the MomentumYes are going on that trip. So yeah, that's exciting. So that's already planned out, which is great.
Will that be your first taster of sort of, something very different to the European context?
In the sense of doing ministry work, yes. As in that's the first time doing anything missional outside of the UK. So that's very exciting. And then first time in Africa as well, which is cool. A plus.
Yeah, how many are you expecting to go on that trip to the Gambia then?
We've got 20 people coming, and 13 of them are from this university, this town.
If you're enjoying this podcast, why not give us a 5-star rating so that more folks can hear these inspiring stories and join us in praying, sending, giving and going? Or how about inviting me or one of my colleagues to speak at your church? I'd love to hear from you. Email me on matt@frontiers.org.uk. And now back to the podcast.
As in that's the first time doing anything missional outside of the UK. So that's very exciting. And then first time in Africa as well, which is cool. A plus.
Yeah, how many are you expecting to go on that trip to the Gambia then?
We've got 20 people coming, and 13 of them are from this university, this town.
Wow,
so
that's so cool. I mean, you guys are talking about turning up at uni and, this is just part of the CU, Heart for Nations, and doing the MomentumYes course. For me, when I turned up at uni, I was fresh out of a gap year in India. And I think within the first CU session, people were jumping up saying, hey, we just did this short-term trip to Estonia, and about 6 or 7 of us did the trip. It was an amazing time of seeing God at work and sharing the gospel with people. And they all had made this commitment to each one of them who went on the short-term trip to lead a short-term trip the following summer. Wow. So I jumped into, uni and CU life. And it was just the thing now that every summer there'd be 4 or 5 short-term trips to different nations. And I was like, this is awesome. So I went off to Albania in 1992 with a group, which was just stunning for me in my first short-term experience. But that's what I'm praying that this will become a thing for universities all around the country again, that just short-term trips, whether, pre-organized with bigger organizations or just run by the students themselves. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, wow, that's such an amazing culture that you jumped in on, and pray for that over here as well.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, but whether it's 1 trip or 3 or 4 trips to choose from, doesn't matter. But just this idea that it's part of the DNA of uni, that we think about, giving a portion of our summer to God's kingdom overseas.
Yeah, please God.
So, okay, bring us up to speed, perhaps with where things are at, or Lena, Zach, what are you thinking as you take on the baton a little bit from how things started in the last year or 2?
So after the MomentumYes course, we kind of got everyone to brainstorm what we wanted this group to look like going forwards for Heart for Nations. So we then ran last semester some kind of different cycles of prayer stations, and we had lots of Zoom calls with people that are on the field, people who have been, people who are planning to go, which I would say they were one of the standouts of really kind of breaking down that barrier of missionaries or field workers as like extra holy, special, godly people, and actually they're people who are just like us. And it really showed that could be us in 5 years' time, who knows. Yeah, and we're still dreaming about what it's going to look like going forwards. But we can see that God's clearly at work, and we just want to, be obedient to whatever He's doing here.
That's really cool. And Zach, what about, have you been able to connect with other universities in this journey, or who might be thinking along similar lines or starting similar groups?
I mean, from what we've heard in discussion, there are currently other universities which are starting similar things. We're now hearing from other people in different universities who want to do it. So it is growing a bit, which is actually quite exciting. Actually getting in contact with these people and actually discussing it further it's not just based here. It's not just a 1 year little thing, but this is spreading, and this is something much bigger than what we are, which is very encouraging and just exciting.
It's also student prayer for nations.
Yes. Was it once
during holidays, basically?
Yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so during the holidays, it would be Wednesday morning. Different universities across the country would all join on a Zoom call and just pray over a specific nation or a specific thing, but it was all nations focused. And yeah, I mean, that was very mixed and was from all over the place. It was great.
It was a student. It is a student-led thing. Like there's no real adults involved in this at all, except sometimes when we get them to come and share. But it's just a really powerful time for people all around the country to get together and be like, no, we are passionate about the nations, and we're passionate about God's heart for the nations. So let's pray. Let's get together and use our holidays to pray for this.
So good. Wow. I'm really excited, because I guess even when your brother was at uni, 5-6 years ago now, is it maybe more? I remember him starting the Heart for Nations at his uni, and it went really well for that year. But I suppose the downside was the handover, because traditionally the international secretary, the main focus is absolutely reaching the internationals on the doorstep, at the university, on campus. How can we get the CU thinking about reaching out to these guys, and maybe they'll take the gospel back to countries that don't have the gospel hardly. But to make it a twin thing where you're even thinking about, students being mobilized to go and give their lives to global mission and taking the name of Jesus around the world as part of that role. That's my dream, that every international secretary will think about the campus plus spurring students to go themselves, or pray or give or be involved in God's global heart. And that's what the course is all about, isn't it? Momentum Yes, which we're refilming for the British context right now. So yeah, watch this space, guys. We'll have that ready, hopefully, in the next few months, the British version of Momentum Yes. But we'll also put a link to the existing one on this podcast's information. Yeah, anything else you guys wanted to cover? Any other anecdotes, perhaps, of other students you've chatted with who went from 0 to 50 or 0 to 100 in terms of thinking about mission?
There's loads, but I think it's worth mentioning as well that the way that Heart for Nations has been pitched, and the way that we, like the core of it, is that it actually fuels the international outreach on campus as well. One of the amazing things we've seen is that actually people inviting international friends to Globe off the back of, oh wait, hang on, God cares about these people too. So actually people coming to Globe because they've been invited by people who've been in Heart for Nations. And so it applies here and now as well. This isn't just a long-term thing, obviously. The dream is that people will catch a vision for the long term as well. But as we learn, as you said, Momentum Yes, it's not just a going course, it's also a praying and sending and mobilizing course. And actually people are catching that. And yeah, I think that's, for me, that's been one of the major encouragements is seeing people coming to Globe who wouldn't have come if they hadn't been invited by the people in Heart for Nations. Yes,
I love that. And actually that taps into one of the fears that sometimes church leaders have, that, but if we get really into global mission and present, that third of the world that's never had the gospel really, then we might lose so many of our good people from church. And it's understandable. You're trying to build a strong community. You're trying to, build ministries here in the UK for, lots of good needs. And there's this fear that, we'll lose people. But actually, that if people are getting a heart for nations around the world, and even if they go for 5 or 10 years, they'll come back and they'll be so excited about the nations on our doorstep. Even while they're going, they'll be excited about reaching them. And it should really, bring a blessing to the local church, the sending church. and you're talking about the same on campus. It brings a blessing to the internationals on your doorstep, and hopefully to the nations in the future where the gospel's never gone.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we'll definitely keep praying for that, for your uni and beyond, that this will keep sparking off local ministries and people being sent, more laborers for the ends of the earth. Yeah, anything else? Any other little stories, little anecdotes, friends of yours in the group?
I mean, one of the big things, like the big times where we've seen that people around here there is a change happening, is we've done one. We did an all-night prayer night, which was each like different people, all leading sessions on different regions over the world, all just gathering overnight and praying together. And I'll be honest, I was not expecting many people to come. It's all night, it's a Friday night. But I think 13 people were there all night and 18 came, which, I mean, that blew my expectation out of the water. It was wild. And then also just seeing these are people who are dedicating a whole night in just prayer for the nations, or even like the amount of work some people put into their sessions, just designated on their regions, was just massively encouraging to see, because there were some people who went from having no heart at the beginning of the year to now they're making massive boards on different countries, and that's wild.
Wow.
And this is, and we're doing another one tonight, which, because a lot of people couldn't go to the first one, so why not do another one? So
that's cool.
Hopefully, we'll see what happens there.
So good. And to put this in context, there are a few universities that have Christian unions around the country of maybe 150 or 200, not that many, but your university, the whole CU, what is 50, 40, something like that, or less?
Less, yeah. We probably have around 30 regular people.
So
to have 13 people stay all night was
18
massive for us.
Amazing. That's like half the CU, just really
exactly.
God's heart for the nations. Very exciting. Brilliant, guys. This has been awesome. Such an encouragement to, I'm sure, many of our listeners who are currently studying at unis around the country, or perhaps in the States or other countries around the world. So thank you. Thanks for sharing your story with us. We're going to obviously stay in touch with you guys and I'll be praying for you. I'm excited about the Gambia trip in the summer, and dream big, keep dreaming big. We're praying about the connections you've got with other universities and passing on what you've seen God doing with your gang right down there. So maybe one day I'll be able to come all the way down there and experience what you guys are doing.
Please do. You're very welcome.
It's been a privilege to chat with you today, guys. Thanks for sharing with us, and see you soon. Thanks so much for listening. I hope today's episode has been inspiring and challenging. For more, check us out on our website, frontiers.org.uk, and on all social media platforms @FrontiersUK. Have a great week, and make sure you don't miss our next episode.